Okay, we're gonna mount this KAGE plow kit onto our L6060 Kubota tractor. So to start with, we're going to put the front mount on. You can do this with 2 people. This here will mount with 4 14mm bolts. Your tapered front punch is your best friend doing this stuff. I'm just going to run these in a little bit so we got a little more thread holding them. There's 4 bolts up here. And we're still loose, got some room to move around. That's what we want. If you got a person that can hold this up and you get it with the punch, you're doing real good. But I have the crane available, so I'll use it. Okay, now we'll have a driver side frame and a passenger side frame. They'll be designated by this little stud sticking out on the frames. So that will go towards the outside and to designate location. So we'll pick this up. The stud's on that side. This is going to be the passenger side. We're going to slide it under the axle. These will be 16mm bolts with nuts. They're a grade 8. I'm going to pick this front one up and line up. It just goes on the outside of the front frame. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. Just slide it under. Get a bolt, the front hole, and a nut. Hold it on, but leave it loose. Now I'm going to start on the passenger side putting this in. These 4 bolts will be used to bolt it on. We will reuse these own Kubota bolts. So we got a bracket for the hydraulics, which I'll take out. And there's spacers behind these, so just so you know. And they're dropping. I'm just going to slide this frame up between. I'm going to start on top because that bracket don't take any energy to move around. We'll get a bolt in. With that punch I can keep prying around in circles until I get it centered, which makes it really nice. Otherwise you really fight. Okay, we'll get this bolt back in here. This is the easy side, so. Okay, them are all 4 started. Okay, on the driver's side here now, we have there's fuel tank on both sides, so we got to take off that bracket again, and then the other holes are just already there. All these bolts are designated in the print as which ones will go there and labeled on the bag. So I get 2 lock washers and 2 bolts here, and we'll reuse 2 of the bolts of the Kubota tractor on this application. This is a lot tighter fit to get this one up in here, so I'm using a floor jack. I'm going to hold the weight of the tank up just to give me a little hand. And again, this has got the spacers, and we're going to actually reuse these spacers on the top bolts because otherwise the bolts are a little on the long side. We're gonna bring this up. Just a really tight fit on this one. I am gonna put our bolts on the top with the spacer. The bottom bolts will just go back in with the factory Kubota bolts. There, started. That one started, and I'll get the last one started. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the front end and get all these holes filled with the front bolts. We're back here on the passenger side. I forgot to install this bracket, so we're going to put it on. It goes in these bottom two bolts. You just pull that off. It goes on the surface of this. And well, it started anyhow, and we'll just tighten that up with the socket afterwards. And we also have a hose guide bracket here to put on. So this uses some 1/2-inch bolts that's designated in the kit. Two nuts and two flock washers. Bracket and bolt go through. There's two holes here. On this unit, both frames have the holes cut in, but it goes on the passenger side. So now we're going to start tightening all the bolts. We're going to start by the 4 bolts on the front mount, tighten them, and then we'll just tighten all the rest of the bolts. No sequence needed. Now everything is bolted on hardware-wise for this application. We are now going to mount the cylinder and hook the hose up for the lift. I'm grabbing the whole cylinder here, set this on my cart, grab pin for it, and a hitch pin and a linch pin. The ports go towards the tractor. Sticker on this pin is, holes are pretty tight. There. Put the linch pin in. Use a 5/16 Allen wrench to screw the ports out. Spin these out. I had these pre-loosened, but they can be very, very tight from the factory, so be prepared to stretch a little to break them loose, because they're installed, I believe, from the factory with Loctite. Okay, we have 2 hydraulic fittings out of the kit here. These are from 3/8 pipe to the 08 JIC. We put 2 wraps of the Teflon tape on the pipe side that's going into the cylinder. Start 1 thread down on the fittings. That screw in. I'm just going to spin it in by hand and then go to the other one. These will use a 13/16 wrench to tighten. And start on the top. They just continue to leak oil. We will get the hoses ready next. So there's 2 sets of hoses. These will go from the tractor to the plow for the angle. We are not installing that in this video, but these 2 and the part number for these will be 708. It's in the crimp on these. They're JIC on one end, pipe thread on the other. We are going to install some hydraulic ends on this. This may vary from tractor to tractor on the type of fitting being used. On this tractor, it's a rental unit, and we are putting these American Pioneer style couplers on to use. Get the Teflon. But typically, if you've got new application, it's done a little bit different than this. But the fittings will be all designated in the kit, or should be all designated in the kit for proper installation. Putting these in a vise a lot of times is nicer, but this is what I got right here right now. So I'm going to just slide this end of the hose through the hose coupler, bring it under the frame, and I'm going to put this one on the bottom since it's the one leaking the most, so we get it stopped. That'll be a 7/8 wrench to tighten this JIC fitting. JIC is a tapered fitting, so actually quite simple and no sealants ever needed. Bring that down, and now I'll grab the other hose. And put a coupler on this. Grab this hose. I'm going to run it through the hose guide and then just up here to the fitting. Spin it on by hand and go to the 7/8 wrench again. I know that the top hose will go on the top inside fitting, the bottom hose will go on the bottom inside fitting. For the joystick control, just snap them in. But again, this is not the typical couplers that are going to be used with a Kubota, but in this application it is what is getting used. So everything's tight and on. We should be able to actuate the cylinder, start the tractor and actuate the cylinder. So it should go down if I was right, and it should go up. And that's the installation of the tractor mount for a Kubota L6060.